With any model of iPhone 16, press the camera control button to open the camera app. Press again to use the control as a shutter or record button. Like with the regular shutter button, pressing and holding will start a quick video recording. Press gently on the control until you feel a click, and that opens up the camera control island. Here I have the iPhone 16 Pro cameras. Slide your finger over the camera control to switch cameras. And get used to doing that if you want to get the most from this new feature, because with a little bit of practice, it becomes more intuitive. This year, Apple has added the camera control to the iPhone 16 camera system. If you own an iPhone 16, then you'll want to get the most out of this new feature. I actually use iPhones to create video content professionally, so I have no choice but to find out how everything works. In this video, I'm going to walk you through setting up and using your new camera features on your iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max. Press gently twice on the camera control, like a double tap. You can feel it click twice. So this opens up a menu of different settings. Slide your finger on the camera control and choose zoom. Another half press selects it, and then you can slide your finger on the camera control again to zoom in and out. The island itself is also a slider, so now you can zoom faster and further. Some of these modes are photo-only modes. Switch to video mode. Now, when you double half press the camera control and swipe to change the mode, you're going to see some of the modes are darker. These are the photo-only modes, so you can't select them in video mode. The camera control has a space in the Preserve Settings menu. Go to Settings, Camera, Preserve Settings. Go down to Controls menu. The Preserve Settings menu is really useful because it allows you to tell your iPhone camera which settings to remember and to keep for next time. So if you want your iPhone to keep the settings that you set with the camera control, rather than resetting them when you close the camera, toggle this on. So half press and select Styles. You can now swipe through various different looks, which you can apply to your photos. This is just a very quick and easy way to adjust the mood of your photo. Photographic styles were introduced with the iPhone 13, and they offer a way to apply unique color and tone looks to your photos. With the iPhone 16, these styles have been significantly expanded in scope. There's new controls for film-like color casts and what Apple calls undertones, which they say can be used to fine-tune skin tones. Half press again and select Tone. This is a new way of setting tone in your iPhone camera, which basically controls the darkness of the shadows. As you may know, a computational process known as tone mapping is used by all smartphones to even out the contrast between light and dark areas of the frame. The tone setting now gives us some control over this process. If we set it lower, the shadows get darker, and the image as a whole is going to contain more contrast. If we set the tone higher, the shadows are lighter, and the frame as a whole has less contrast. Now, it's important to understand the difference between this and a regular exposure setting. If we want to make the whole image lighter or darker by changing exposure, we can then use the EV setting, which stands for exposure value. The cool thing is, these settings are non-destructive. If you didn't like how your photo turned out, open up your image in the Photos app and edit. Go to the Style and Tone setting, and you can now change it for a different look. You can also go back to the standard look. Each setting is customizable using this control feature. Move your finger around in this box to fine-tune, and then use the slider to adjust how much of this look you want to apply. And you're going to be changing these three settings, which you can see above the photo: tone, color, and palette. So palette is controlled by the amount slider. Moving your finger up and down controls tone, and sliding left and right controls color. So if you want to reset this preset, just tap the circular arrow. You can only edit the style and tone of a photo if it was shot in the HEIF format. If you shoot photos in the JPEG format, when you capture a photo using one of these styles, the look is going to be baked in, and you're not going to be able to edit it later. So to make sure that you are capturing HEIF format photos, go into Camera Settings, select Formats, and then choose High Efficiency. Again, if you want your iPhone camera to remember these settings for next time, go to Preserve Settings again and toggle on Photographic Style. If you tap the arrow to open up extra settings, you're going to find this Styles and Tones controller here as well. Apple calls this undertones and says this feature allows you to choose a specific tone for your specific skin tone. If you want to change the default style, open Settings and go to Camera Settings. Select Photographic Styles, and now it will ask you to select 4 photos. Go ahead and play around with the same box that we saw earlier to find the look you like the most. Click Save Tone and Color and then Done. Though this isn't permanent, you can go back and do the same thing over again if you want to change it. I'm going to call this camera controller slider button because it is both things at the same time, isn't it? But this controller can actually be customized. By default, the camera control needs 1 click to open your camera, but you might find that you keep accidentally pressing it and the camera keeps opening when you don't want it to, in which case you can change this to 2 clicks, and that way you're much less likely to open your camera by accident. Go to Settings, Camera Control, and then tap single click or double click, whichever one you prefer. Here, instead of opening camera, you can actually set the camera control to open the magnifier app, the code scanner, or your favorite third-party camera app, if it supports the camera control. Now, if you find yourself a little bit frustrated by this camera control, you can adjust how sensitive it is, and you can even just switch it off completely if you want. Go to Settings, Accessibility, and Camera Control. To adjust the pressure that you need for a light press on the camera control, choose a firmness option. Practice this gesture to find the perfect pressure for you, and you will see the button here light up. When it registers a half press, you will see a bluish light on this button, and when it registers a full press, the button on the screen lights up white. So this might help you get a better feel for it. And you can also adjust the speed that's required for the double half press. Below double light press speed, choose how fast you need to press the iPhone to recognize a light double press. Now, if you want to make it so the camera control doesn't register half a press of your finger, so that it basically just acts as a button to open the camera and to take a photo or a record button, turn off Show Adjustments. I've been using the 16 Pro for a few weeks now, and I found I sometimes accidentally press the camera control button while I'm putting the phone down or while I'm picking it up, for example. And as well, if you want to put your iPhone 16 into a clamp, like on a gimbal or on a tripod, or maybe an auto cue, again, this button can get pressed down by the clamp. For whatever reason, you might want to just turn this thing off completely, in which case you can use this setting here to turn off camera control. Personally, I suggest spending some time getting used to it. At first, I was like a lot of people thinking, what is the point of this control? But after practicing with it for a while, the control started to become more fluid. Of course, you can use the screen controls, and of course that feels more natural because we're very used to them. The advantage of the camera control is that your finger doesn't need to move around all over the phone. You've got your main controls in one place. I'd say that this controller is mainly for photos, because for video I think probably it's less useful. Most people put their iPhone in a case, so how's that going to work with the new camera control? Well, you're going to need a case which is designed to allow access to the camera control button slider. And this is actually a case by Freewell, designed especially for the iPhone 16 Pro. This has a specially designed hole in the side, and I find that it works perfectly fine with the camera control, because I'm able to do a full click and a half click without any issue. And this one is actually a cage, which is part of Freewell's Genius Rig setup. Again, this is designed for the iPhone 16 Pro, and there's space here to access the camera control. One thing the camera control does is allow you to hold your phone vertically with one hand and then use your thumb on the controller to open the camera and take a photo. And if you're left-handed, you can just use your finger instead. You can also change the settings with one hand. But to me, this isn't really very comfortable. Just for a quick snap of something, when you've only got one hand available, I can see that there's an advantage. Now, if you'd rather use the press on the camera control to open a different app, you can actually set it to do that. Under camera control settings, you'll find a list of apps which can be opened. And what you find here is going to depend on whether the app creator has added this functionality to the app. And for now, apart from the defaults, I've got Instagram, Moment, and ProTake. Apart from opening it, Moment has actually added camera control functionality to the app as well. So you can half press and double half press to adjust some settings. The Moment app actually lets you adjust white balance. There's also zoom. You can adjust focus, EV or exposure value. You can adjust ISO and shutter speed. ProTake also supports the iPhone 16 camera control. And here you've got zoom, focus puller, which just allows you to adjust focus, and you can switch focus between auto and manual using the camera control. And as well, like with the Moment app, you can adjust shutter speed and ISO. Unfortunately, as yet, the Blackmagic camera app does not support the camera control, but I'm sure that they're going to be working on it right now. So Apple has now finally introduced a pause button, which we can use when recording video. Start recording, and now you're going to see a pause button appear beneath the record button. Tap that to pause recording, and then just tap again to restart recording. While you're paused, you can change the zoom using the buttons on the screen or use the camera control. But the thing is that you're not going to be able to switch cameras while you're recording, whether you use pause or not. For example, if you start recording with the main camera and then tap the 5 times button, it will simply zoom in 5 times using the main camera. Okay, so with recording paused, if you tap the main record button now, you will just stop recording. The iPhone 16 Pro can record 120 frames per second video in 4K resolution. And this is actually really great for the extra drama that we can capture in the highest video quality. With the main camera selected, just simply tap the frame rate as normal until you get 120 frames per second. Now note that the ultra-wide and the telephoto selectors are gone. And that's because you can only shoot 120 frames per second video with the main camera. Press record and capture some 120 frames per second video. Now if you want to view the video as slow motion, you're going to need to open it in the Photos app and tap the settings button at the bottom. At the top, there's a button which looks like a dial or a clock. Tap that to open a playback speed menu, and then select the speed at which you want the video to play back. So I'm going to select 25%, which means I'll be converting the video to a 30 frames per second video clip. At the bottom, we now have this slow motion position selector. The portion of the line which kind of has more vertical lines is normal speed, and where the lines are more spread out is where the slow motion occurs. And you can actually slide these points around to change the position. If you want the whole video to be slow motion, just slide the points as far as they can go to each end. And you can also be creative here, and you can choose a point where you want the slow motion to kick in. If you pick a key moment in the video, this can actually look really cool. And then just choose the second point for when you want to return to regular speed. Finally, click Done at the top, and when you share this clip, the slow motion effect is going to be baked in. Smartphones now come with very good inbuilt stabilization, and this allows us to hold the camera in our hands, and we can add slow movements like a push in or a pull out, for example. For a really pro looking shot, you can capture very slow movement, so slow that the audience might not even notice, but it does make the shot more dynamic than a simple stationary shot. Just try to move very slowly and steadily. Now, to enhance the professionalism of this shot, we can shoot at 60 or 120 frames per second and then slow the video to 30 or 24 frames per second when editing. And that way, any hand movements are slowed right down to half or to a quarter of the speed, and it does make the shot look a lot smoother. The iPhone 16 Pro features a new 24mm main camera, which Apple has named the Fusion camera. Apple introduced the 48-megapixel sensor for the iPhone 14 Pro, but now we have the second generation of this sensor. And this new Fusion sensor is actually larger and higher quality. In practice, the Fusion improves the 2x zoom on the main sensor. Open the camera and you're going to see this 2x zoom button. So this is not actually a separate camera. It just uses the main camera and it zooms in 2 times. But the 48-megapixel sensor pixels are combined to allow you to shoot 4K video without a drop in quality. And as well, you're going to get high quality 12-megapixel photos. And this new ultra-wide is 13mm equivalent focal length. The difference is that the ultra-wide is now a 48-megapixel sensor, which means that when we enable RAW Max here, we're going to get 48-megapixel photos from both the main and the ultra-wide cameras. Smartphone cameras are pretty complicated these days. There is stuff online, but I thought it would be nice to have all the information in one place. I've been using smartphone cameras professionally for about 7 years now. But in the last few weeks, I've been putting everything that I've learned into this book, Smartphone Videography, Beginner to Advanced. You can buy this on Amazon. It's in ebook and paperback form, and you can actually pre-order the ebook already. And if you want to learn how to create better content with your smartphone, you can join us on Patreon, where I've got structured courses that can turn you into a video creator pro. The iPhone 16 Pro has a 48-megapixel main sensor. By default, you get 24-megapixel photos, but you can also set your camera to shoot 48-megapixel or 12-megapixel photos. In camera settings, go to Formats and you'll see Photo Mode. Tap that to switch between 12 and 24 megapixels. Below that, you have ProRAW and resolution control, so switch that on. Now when you open the camera in photo mode, you're going to see a button for RAW Max. Tap it and you'll be taking 48 megapixels in the RAW format. And if you long press this button, you can choose these different formats without having to open settings. RAW is basically an uncompressed format, and therefore the files are bigger, over 10 times the size. So each photo is like taking 10 photos in storage terms. And the main reason to capture photos in this uncompressed format is for a better editing experience. But you can also shoot 48 megapixels in the HEIF format, and that is going to create smaller files. Back in the ProRAW menu, choose HEIF Max. So now you can get 48 megapixel photos, but without filling up your phone's storage with huge files. Unfortunately, you can't take portrait photos in these RAW formats. If we switch to portrait mode, you'll see that there's no RAW button. And if we switch to selfie camera, you can see RAW is now at 12 megapixel rather than 48 megapixel. Now it's important to remember that you can only get 48 megapixel photos from a sensor that has 48 megapixels. So in the case of the iPhone 16 Pro, that is the main camera and the ultra-wide camera. Now under the ProRAW Format section, you're going to see some new options. You've got JPEG lossless, JPEG XL lossless, and JPEG XL lossy. JPEG XL is actually a new image format and is designed to replace older formats like JPEG with significantly better compression and quality. And it offers both lossy and lossless compression, supports high dynamic range, as well as a wide color gamut. Putting it simply, JPEG XL is like HEVC for video, in that it produces smaller file sizes, but is yet to be universally compatible, Now note that while only iPhone 16 Pro models can take JPEG XL photos, any Apple devices running iOS 17 or later, or Mac OS 14 and later, can view images in this format. If we switch to the JPEG XL Lossy, this is going to allow us to shoot ProRAW photos at 48 megapixels, and the Lossy format here uses the least amount of memory of these three formats. JPEG XL Lossless preserves the exact pixel values of the original image. There's not going to be any loss of image quality or data, so if you really want the highest quality images, choose this setting. But obviously, photos are going to take up more space. And if you tap each setting, you can see below how much memory each photo is going to use. What this means in practice is that when you take a RAW photo with the RAW button enabled in your camera app, when we then open this photo in the Photos app, we can see that it is in the RAW format. So essentially, this is what's known as a DNG file. And if I send it to my Mac, you can see it has the letters DNG at the end of the file. To view and edit DNG files on your computer, you're going to need a program like Lightroom, which supports DNG. And when we select either of these JPEG XL formats in our iPhone and then choose RAW in the camera app, the RAW, or otherwise known as DNG, file is going to be smaller than if we use the regular old-fashioned JPEG. Apple has introduced a new Spacial Mode in its camera app, which allows users to capture immersive spatial photos and videos. Taking spatial photos is available on all iPhone 16 models, while spatial video is available on all iPhone 16 models as well, plus the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. Open the camera app, swipe left to select Spatial Mode, toggle between photo and video capture. You do need to hold the phone in a landscape orientation to capture 3D content. Then just tap the shutter button to take a photo or start-stop video recording. The iPhone is able to capture 3D content by using two of the rear cameras, obviously in the same way that having two eyes allows us to see in 3D. Spatial photos and videos appear as regular 2D content on the iPhone itself, but they can be viewed in their full 3D glory on devices like Apple Vision Pro. For regular video frame rate, we have basically three options: 24 frames per second, 25 frames per second, and 30 frames per second. 24 frames per second is the frame rate movies and dramas are captured in, and 25 frames per second is used in countries that have a 50 Hz electricity supply, for example, European countries. But actually, even though I live in Europe, I use 30 frames per second for most of my videos. For platforms like YouTube and other social media, 30 frames per second is just basically more convenient, and as well, I do find it more forgiving in different lighting situations. For example, in bright light, you're going to get a fast shutter speed, and with 24 frames per second, that fast shutter speed is a little bit more obvious than with 30 frames per second. So when video is shot in bright daylight, it can come out looking less smooth in 24 frames per second compared to 30 frames per second. One reason to shoot 25 frames per second is if you are experiencing artificial light flickering in your videos, and this might happen if you're using 30 frames per second in a European country or any country where the electricity is 50 Hz. Switching to 25 frames per second will often fix this issue. Now, certain frame rates work together when editing. 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and 120 frames per second all work together well. 60 frames per second and 120 frames per second can both be slowed to 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. But if you shoot 25 frames per second, in that case you should choose the 100 frames per second for slow motion, because 25 and 100 go together. To shoot 25 frames per second and 100 frames per second, you need to enable these frame rates in the settings. Go to Camera Settings, Record Video, scroll down and toggle on Show PAL Formats. The iPhone 16 Pro's audio mix feature allows users to adjust and enhance the audio in their recorded videos after capturing them. So it offers 4 modes, and each one is designed to focus on different aspects of the audio. So, for example, reducing background noise or maybe emphasizing voices. Essentially, this is an increasingly common AI audio processing, and it's kind of similar to Adobe's Podcast Enhance online service. But the difference is that Apple's audio mix system offers different modes with different audio styles. So we've got standard, which is just normal, and then we've got in-frame, studio, and cinematic. Standard is basically the regular processing that we get with previous models of iPhone. In-frame adjusts the audio to focus on the audio that's coming from people within the frame, but there is still some background noise. On the other hand, Studio tries to mimic the audio quality of a studio recording, like a professionally recorded podcast, for example, which means that it tries to remove any background noise. Meanwhile, Cinematic aims to replicate the audio experience of watching a movie in a theatre, and this means enhancing the voices, but at the same time, we're still going to get those ambient sounds. Open the Photos app on your iPhone 16 or 16 Pro. Select the video that you want to edit. Tap the Edit button below the video preview. And now tap on Audio Mix to access the audio editing options. And now you can choose from one of the audio mix modes that we just went over. And after you've selected this mode, you can now use the intensity slider, which is below the mix options, to then just fine-tune the effect. Tap done to save the changes. Bear in mind that the audio mix feature is only available for videos that are recorded using the spatial audio on the iPhone 16 models and using the inbuilt microphones. So if you do use an external microphone, when you come to edit the video, here you're going to find that there is no audio mix option. Now here's a tip for adding an external microphone with a USB-C plug. The native camera app doesn't display any audio levels or mic selector. So we can feel a little bit unsure if the audio is being recorded via the external mic or the inbuilt mics. But here's a way to tell. When you first plug in your USB-C mic, the iPhone is going to show you that it's recognized in the dynamic island. So you should see this blue line animation and a USB plug symbol. And that should mean that it's now using the external mic for audio.